So what is going on with Ubisoft? Well, there's a lot going on with Ubisoft, which we're going to get into, and it's not a recent thing. It's been going on for quite some time. The more recent thing that's, making headlines and everybody's talking about is the fact that this week Ubisoft's stock price dropped to an all-time low. This is coming after a significant but minor shareholder is making some pretty interesting demands of the company. They're calling for the CEO to be fired, they're calling for the company to go private, and gear up to start getting ready to sell the company, basically. So this is obviously a build-up, right? It's not something that's happening overnight for one specific reason. Their stock has been in decline for quite a while now, a few years. But the nail on the coffin, so to speak, the most recent thing that triggered this was the underperformance in sales of Star Wars Outlaws. For obvious reasons, I think we can all figure out why that was the case. But I think it's important to say that Star Wars Outlaws isn't the single cause for this, right? The stock has been in decline for years now, and there's a few different reasons for that, which we're going to be discussing in this video. There are a few things going on internally with Ubisoft for a while now. Some of them we know about, some of it is not public, so we can only speculate. And more obviously, a lot of that is external as well. General customer sentiment towards the company has been pretty negative for quite some time now. Now, all of this is aside from the general quality of the games that they've been putting out lately. I don't believe that every single thing that Ubisoft has been putting out or has put out and everything that they do is terrible. I particularly enjoyed the Assassin's Creed franchise, but there's obviously been a lot of flops of the company for a while now. Even games that I hate, like Assassin's Creed Valhalla, that game sold very well. Even though I didn't like it, those games tend to sell very well. So it's not like everything that they make is horrible, appeals to no one, and is just a general financial failure. That's not really the case always. The problem though is that they've been having some really big flops, and in the way that games are made today, there is such a huge budget where if one game doesn't sell well or underperforms, it could break your company. And even a company as big as Ubisoft, if you have enough of those screw-ups, eventually your company will go bankrupt. Now, I don't think that that's about to happen with Ubisoft, but this decline in their profitability, the decline in their stock price, and the overall financial strength of the company, of course, you have enough mess-ups, eventually your company will go under. That's just common sense, right? And more recently, they've had some really big screw-ups that cost them a lot of money. The most recent failure, as we all know, is Star Wars Outlaws, but that isn't the biggest recent failure that they've had. By far, the biggest failure has been Skull and Bones. That game cost $200 million and 11 years to develop. And from my understanding, it looks like they've made about a quarter of that back, so they took a massive loss on the game that they spent over a decade developing. Now we're going to talk about some of the internal problems that have directly led to this and some of them that have been, leading to the company's failure for a long time. I think that that's the less apparent part of this conversation. Now, while the sales for Star Wars Outlaws definitely did underperform, that game didn't cost nearly as much to make as Skull and Bones. From what I was seeing, it was about half to a third of the development cost. Now, I'm not surprised at all that game's sales are underperforming, right? I think anybody could have seen that from a mile away just looking at the game. It looks horrible, it plays horrible, there's just nothing interesting about it. I don't know how that game ever got greenlit to being sold. The other thing is that while investors have expressed dissatisfaction with the sales numbers of the game, it definitely underperformed compared to what they were expecting. We don't have the entire sales picture just yet. It's not hard to imagine or assume how the sales of the game are going to be going forward, but it probably would be wrong to throw a number out there at this point because technically the game just came out and it's still making sales. But regardless of the general public's consensus towards this company, if they were always putting out good games, I don't think that would matter a whole lot when it comes to sales. Even if people don't like some of their practices or don't agree with the creative direction on some of their games. If the games that were getting put out were good, that wouldn't matter a whole lot, the sales numbers would still be good. The real root of the cause here and what's responsible for all these problems is internal. It is systematic in nature. Because this isn't just one mess up on one game. This isn't just one thing that, one director said or one scandal. It's several of them. It's everything from the creative direction of the games, it's the quality of the games, it's, the mission statement of the company, it's different programs that they have, it's the mentality and public image that they've created of this company that rubs people the wrong way. And these internal issues are not just responsible for their production capacity and the quality control of the games that they put out, they're also responsible for the way that the public is now perceiving them. So what exactly is going on at Ubisoft? What is happening internally that even if we throw $200 million and 11 years of production behind the game, we still can't get it to sell? And what have they done to piss off the general public so much where even people like me who do enjoy a lot of the things that they put out still absolutely despise them? Well, there are a lot of reasons for that, and this conversation has several layers with issues that date back to over a decade ago, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Well, let's start with the most recent development issue, Skull and Bones. What exactly happened there? So the story of Skull and Bones, as most people know, starts in 2013 with the release of Assassin's Creed Black Flag. So Assassin's Creed Black Flag was a pretty darn good game. I enjoyed it a lot. A lot of people say that it's not a very good Assassin's Creed game, and I tend to agree with that, but it was probably the best or one of the best pirate games that was out. Especially for the standards of 11 years ago, and even if you play the game now, honestly, a lot of it still holds up. The game was very good. You know, the new ship battle mechanics that they introduced, boarding the ships, destroying the forts, the whole idea behind it was absolutely brilliant. It was a great game. The thing that a lot of people pointed out, though, is that this game is not very much in line with the traditional Assassin's Creed games, and that side of the game was actually boggling it down. So they've been asking Ubisoft for years to make a dedicated pirate game, right? Because they clearly know what they're doing. So why not go ahead and make a dedicated pirate game where we're not doing like trailing missions, we're not, having to check all those boxes of the traditional Assassin's Creed game. And that is what the company started doing just about right away, right? The game was in development for 11 years. This game came out in 2013. It's now 2024. 11 years pretty much lines up with the time frame of production. What we know about the production of this game and some of the challenges that they faced basically boils down to development hell. This game had several restarts. It's my understanding that this game was restarted 3 different times during its development and production. They also went through 3 different directors. There was issues with employee misconduct and a bunch of stuff going on. Another important thing to mention is that Ubisoft opened a new studio in Singapore, and they made a deal with the government where they would be funding part of this project in exchange of having some of their developers work on the game as well. The reason the Singaporean government did that is because they have a big issue with people that get educated and trained in tech, then leaving and going to work in other countries. So they did that to try to retain some of the workers. The reason why this is important is because several times Ubisoft wanted to terminate this project. They wanted to completely scrap the development of the game, but they weren't able to because they were under contract with the Singaporean government, which basically forced them to have to finish the game and put something out. So no matter how unfinished the game was or how bad the concept was or how unsatisfied they were with it, they were forced to put it out because they needed to satisfy that contract. Another thing that I've read that is also very common is that every time that there was a change in management or a new director came in, they wanted to put their mark on it, right? They wanted to give the game their take and their spin on it. So because of that, the development and general creative direction of this game was restarted several times. Basically a case of too many cooks in the kitchen and everybody thinking they know better. And the final product that we got is something that not even Ubisoft wanted to put out. They try to frame this as the first quadruple A game and something that everybody had been asking for forever, and they were so proud to put it out, but now we know that even they wanted to scrap the entire project. This is not a case of the game just needed a little more time in the oven. The developers were working on this game and they got pressured by the suits to put out the game before it was finished. No, the company wanted to scrap this entire game and the entire project multiple times, and they just weren't able to. As far as some of the issues that Star Wars Outlaws might have had, we don't have the big picture of that just yet. The game is a little bit too new, the company hasn't made too many statements about that, we haven't gotten a lot of insight in the development of that game. The only thing that we know is that it underperformed in sales expectations and clearly in players' expectations as well, because the game sucks. I mean, we know that, and it's not a surprise that it didn't sell well. The big surprise for the public and for sure for the investors is that they weren't able to convert such a beloved and famous IP and translate that into actual sales. That was probably one of the biggest surprises because you put Star Wars behind anything, the tendency is that it will sell. So the fact that they managed to fail with such a huge name and IP behind their game is probably what completely shattered investor confidence, and it's now causing them to call for these massive structural changes with the company. It's almost as if over the years they've lost some of their creative talent that made them so successful back in the day, which certainly did happen. I'm probably going to be mispronouncing his name, but one of those talents is Patrice Desilets, who is the guy who worked on the original Assassin's Creed 2, the Ezio Collection, up until Brotherhood. And it doesn't surprise me that the direct sequel to Brotherhood, Revelations, which by the way still featured the beloved protagonist Ezio, wasn't popular or iconic at all. It doesn't surprise me at all either that Assassin's Creed 3 wasn't nearly as popular, successful, or iconic as the previous games either because, well, he didn't work on that game either. Now that's not to say that there haven't been any successful Assassin's Creed games that have come out since his departure, right? Most notably and recently we can think of Valhalla, which sold very well. I personally hated Valhalla, I did not like that game, but I did enjoy Odyssey, I did enjoy Syndicate, and I really liked Mirage. But those games are clearly not as iconic, and the main reason why I like Mirage is because it captures some of the essence of the first games. Although that is mine and several other people's opinion, I think it would be disingenuous to say that since the guy left, there have been no successful AC games that were made ever since. Because clearly there have been, they clearly are very successful and they sell very well. It's just that there is a general sentiment amongst the fan base that ever since he left, the following games have not been nearly as iconic and the franchise has never been the same since. Anything after Brotherhood was not nearly as good or iconic, and it just happens to be the last AC game that he worked on before getting fired. It's inevitable that if you're spreading those resources thin and you're producing en masse a new game every single year for the same franchise, you start milking it, the quality is going to drop. The general consensus that I've read based on my research that a lot of people bring up, it looks like he did not want to continue the Assassin's Creed franchise. It is my understanding that Patrice wanted Assassin's Creed to be a trilogy. Brotherhood was supposed to have been the last game. Ubisoft had different ideas though. Seeing the success of the game, they probably wanted to make a new release every year, kind of like what they have going on right now. My understanding also from this story is that Ubisoft's intention was to split Patrice's team in two, so that was already an issue back then, and if I had to guess, it's probably still an issue now, where they're spreading their resources thin. Instead of dedicating all their team and all their efforts on the current game that they're developing, they're already working towards the next one, right? So they're not putting all their energy and focus on the current thing they're working on, they're basically trying to min-max the production. And it sounds like Patrice didn't like the idea of that, right? He wanted the entire team's effort going to the current project, along with also what we had mentioned before, he didn't want the game to continue on as like this massive series of games. If there's a drop in quality for these next titles that come out and his name is associated with that, that could affect his reputation, right? So that's probably why he was having that disagreement with the company as well. And from what he has publicly stated, it's not like he was given a warning or anything like that. He came to work, he got fired, he was escorted out by security, and they actually fired another one of his associates or friends. Ubisoft, of course, has never confirmed that this was the case, but it's his impression that this person was fired because they were associated with him, that they had that friendship. So it sounds like they just fired his friend for being his friend. That's what he thinks. I'm not going to say one way or another, I don't know, but this is just how he got fired and kind of what we think and what we know based on what he said, why he wasn't happy working there anymore. There was also another issue with another game that he was working on where he originally stepped down from the company, then Ubisoft acquired the company that was working on the game that he was the director for, and then he ended up almost getting grandfathered back into the company to then get fired. So it was all a complete mess, and I think that it's very obvious that ever since this guy left the company, ever since Brotherhood, Assassin's Creed games have not quite been the same. So it's a very messy situation, and honestly we don't have all the details. Everything that we know is kind of his version of the story. Some of it is public statements that he has made, some of it is assumption from the community and different people. We don't have all the facts of the story. A common complaint and a common thing that's said and reported by people that work at Ubisoft is that these changes in management, this is something I've heard repeatedly, that there's a lot of changes in management and everybody kind of wants to leave their mark. I will say though that this particular issue, that's not really a Ubisoft specific problem, that is a corporation problem in general. There's a term that I've heard before called a stupivisor, which I've heard a lot, and I don't know who's coined this term, but it rings really true, especially in my career working for several corporations. The bigger the corporation that I have worked for, the more of these stupid managerial roles there seems to be. The stupivisor role, I think, is a plague that is affecting corporations all across the world. I don't know everywhere, but certainly here in the United States, that is very much the case. Any of you guys who've worked for a big corporation, you know exactly what I'm talking about. We're not talking about that lower management job where if you're sick, you call into that guy and you let him know you're not coming to work, the guy that coordinates the schedule and the staff, the guy that if there's a problem at work, you go talk to him. We're not talking about that guy, that's the manager that's boots on the ground taking care of the staff. No, the stupivisor is more of an executive role. The stupivisor is a member of a company where none of us are really sure why they're there. We just know that they're always in a Zoom meeting. What we also know is that they tend to be able to work from home, and you can normally hear their dogs in the background, and they're normally multitasking, taking care of their kids or running errands. But one thing is always certain about the stupivisor. Rain or shine, you will never catch them doing actual work. You will always find them in a Zoom meeting. This is normally a person with a degree and also an individual that none of us are entirely sure how they came across that role or how they were put in that position. But one thing we do know about them is that they tend to have very unrealistic expectations that you have to meet, and when asking for advice, they tend to give very impractical and nonsensical advice also. Yet somehow you have to listen to them and they're telling you how to do their job even though they've never done your job, and you're not entirely sure if they've ever had a job before this one either. That is the supervisor, the parasite that plagues modern corporate America, and you can find them in every single corporation, certainly in every corporation I've ever worked for. Again, this is not the supervisor or the manager that started where you started and worked their way up and knows the ins and outs of your job and can really help you. This is someone who's never done your job and has no idea what your day or your life is like. That manager is completely replaceable. All of the employees under him, all of those people who are doing the work, all of them are completely replaceable. The only individual who is not replaceable and can never get fired is the supervisor, the one and only who has mastered the sacred art of the Zoom meeting. In my personal life, it seems that every single corporation that I have worked with, not only do I normally have one supervisor, but I have several of them. Whether it was at the beginning of my career working at a grocery store, I had a supervisor. Whether it was when I worked at a warehouse, I had one of those too. Whether it was when I worked at a call center, I too had a supervisor. Whether it was in the last 8 years of my career working as a banker, in every single financial institution that I worked, I had not one but multiple supervisors. And I always observed from afar, looking into their office, wondering what incredible and important things are they discussing in such sacred Zoom meetings, until one day I would listen into these meetings. I was invited to some of these incredible meetings. Now, what fantastical and incredible and high IQ conversations are the supervisors having in these Zoom meetings? It is normally something about their kids or their pets. It is very rare that they're actually discussing something that is work related. And here I wonder, why are you making six figures? And this is a question that not only I, but many of us have had our entire careers. And I am sure that Ubisoft too has a ton of supervisors for every single sector of their company, draining their resources and not producing a whole lot. What they probably do is constantly change the focus of the team, constantly stress out the crap out of everybody, constantly come up with unrealistic expectations, and when asked for guidance or supervision or help on achieving any of those goals, they will likely not have any insightful information. In fact, they will likely be late for Zoom meetings, so get back to work. I am almost 200% sure and would be willing to bet my left nut that this is going on at Ubisoft, because it's going on in every corporation around the world. Why do games cost so much to make, you might ask? Well, it's because the chief executive officer of production has been out there working diligently to make sure that all these 12 Zoom meetings that they get held on time. Bless his heart, man's out there doing God's work, 100% justifies $500,000 a year. Now, obviously, that is not the only reason why games are expensive to make, but I guarantee you that Ubisoft has a ton of people in these roles who are likely the most well-paid employees who do the least amount of work and probably don't like video games and are often the ones calling the shots and making the decisions on said video games that they don't even play. Ah, you commie, you're one of those eat the rich people, huh? You just don't like seeing people make money. Yes, I am the only banker in the country that sits at my desk writing purchase loans and mortgage refinances and thinks to myself, wow, all this commission, I really wish it could all just go away. Probably not, right? But I can't recognize that all these companies are absolutely littered with these people that create nothing and produce nothing, yet somehow drain a huge chunk of the company's resources. And I am sure that Ubisoft is no different. And I wouldn't be surprised if the ones in charge are people with business degrees who have no passion for this medium and have no idea how to make a good game, yet somehow they're telling other people how to do it. Yet somehow they're the ones running the show. Well, no surprise this thing is getting expensive and it's coming out terrible. And then you have guys like Patrice that are telling the executives, hey, no, this is meant to be a trilogy. You know, if we keep milking the franchise, it's going to ruin the integrity of the game. Let's create something else. And the suits are saying, no, milk it. I think it's a case-by-case thing. Every project has its own story, but at the end of the day, clearly the people in charge have no idea what they're doing, are completely out of touch, and I don't think they know how to make a good game, so why are they in charge? Even if your entire focus is not to develop the game, you're just a guy that's more focused on is this gonna sell or not. You're the guy greenlighting things. How would you greenlight something that's so bad that it won't sell? You have to have at least a minimum understanding of what makes a game good, or at least consult with people that do. I don't know. I don't know how this company has been greenlighting so many bad games so often. But frankly, I don't think there's that many more that they can greenlight before the company goes under. And then there's the external factor, right? Where the company has gotten the general public to absolutely hate and not trust them for 1,000 different reasons. It's everything from like their monetization to the way they talk to people and the message they send out. Their most recent game, Assassin's Creed Shadows, I have said that I don't think the game looks half bad. I've done a buyer's guide for the game, and I said I don't share from the general hate that people share for the game. I do share on a lot of that disdain for the company, but when it comes to the game in specific, I think it looks pretty good. I would like to play it, but what is the problem with it? Well, let's start with the monetization. They are literally blocking day one content behind the pre-order wall, and then more of it behind the season pass wall. And this is not additional content. This is content that's already done and available. This is not cosmetics either, right? Because a lot of times you get pre-order bonuses, they're cosmetics. This is not that. This is actual missions, quests, things that are a part of the game. So now you have to pay extra just to get the entire game. It's things like that. It's selling you a game and then saying that you don't actually own that game. You're just paying for the service, kind of what they did with The Crew, and then revoking your ownership of the game. So now when you boot up a game, it might not work anymore because you never owned it. Ubisoft owns it. Stuff like that. And then you have this, another bombshell that just adds more fuel to the fire here. September 12th. Ubisoft mentorship program developed at Ubisoft discriminates against males based on their sex. Well, that's not nice. What is this? On the official Ubisoft website, the developer says, at Ubisoft, we want to build the most creative, diverse, and inclusive teams, and that is exactly what Developed at Ubisoft is all about. Empowering and supporting underrepresented genders. It then clearly states, the program provides mentorship opportunities for women and non-binary individuals interested in video games to develop their skill set in game design and programming. We want to empower you to learn, grow, and become the very best developer that you can be. The article that's covering this then goes ahead and kind of states the obvious here. The program is open to candidates from the United States of America, which one would assume it has to follow US law, which prohibits discrimination based on sex, something Ubisoft is clearly doing with this mentorship program. Well, let's forget about the law for a second. Even if this was legal, just think about general optics. This is how you get people to hate you. Think about how this makes the general public feel, not just consumers, but people that work at Ubisoft. This is demoralizing. If you're somebody that's studying to try to become a developer, right? You have this opportunity that's not accessible to you based on the way you were born, based on your gender. Oh, but it's because you have every other opportunity available to you? Come on, man. Are we really doing this? Are we really trying to roll back the clock here? Let's just not do this. I don't care who the chosen ones are for this program. If it's based on gender, if it's based on race, or anything else that's not just merit, it's discriminatory in nature and it should just not exist. And this is just one of the examples of the morality and the train of thought, the way that this company and so many others think that people are just fed up with and they just don't want to support this anymore. And then they do things like hiring a beautiful model, which is supposed to be what the protagonist is based on, and they purposely uglify the character for no apparent reason. Because attractive women now are somehow a bad thing, right? They don't exist even though you hired one, so they clearly exist. They don't exist. It's an unrealistic standard and nobody should aspire to it. And uglifying the character is somehow going to make our game sell better. You don't have any examples of that being the case, right? Hollywood, they don't do that. Any other games, they don't do that, right? It didn't work for Stellar Blade, right? Stellar Blade was massively unsuccessful because of the way the character looked. So we want to be different. We want to make our character look average and dumpy. Why? Because it's just what you do. It's the right thing to do. And then it's things like in 2022, Ubisoft's Vice President Director of Diversity and Inclusion says that the top priorities for the team are implementing and creating the first ever self-identification program. So you get to tell the company what you identify as. Why does that matter? Why is this important? What does that have anything to do with making a good game? And this is what I mean by stupevisors. This is the guy that gets paid $250,000 to come up with this stuff and sit through 8 Zoom meetings a day. This is the Zoom hero. This is the guy I'm talking about. This is why your game took 11 years to develop, cost $200 million, and it plays like crap. Because instead of focusing your effort and your resources into developing the game, you're paying $250,000 for this guy to come up with a self-identification program. And for what? How does that make the game better in any way? It doesn't. The only thing that this really does is it wins you a few brownie points with an extremely small minority of very weird people, but for the vast majority of the general public, it just makes them hate you. This is a build-up, and yes, the stock prices have plummeted recently, but this is something that's been in decline for a few years now. There's been a few significant failures as of late, sure, but these recent failures are not the entire picture. This is not why the general public has grown to hate this company and tends to want to sabotage or boycott or just have no part in anything that they put out. Look at Assassin's Creed Shadows, for example. The game is not even out, and in my opinion, it actually looks pretty decent. But people just hate this company so much, everything that they stand for, and all of their recent decisions, that people are just hoping that the game will fail without even playing it. It's gone to the point where people haven't even played the game yet, but they're just hoping that you will fail because they hate your company so much. And it's going to be very difficult for them to recover from that. And if I was an investor, I would be worried. But with that said, they're in luck because they're in the gaming industry. All it takes and all they have to do is just to put out good games. That's literally all they have to do. Even if people hate the company, they hate everything that you stand for, and they're hoping for your failure, if you come out with good games, people generally speaking will still buy it. This is one of those industries where the vast majority of people don't care about who you are, what you stand for, or what you say. If you put out a good game, people will buy it. So there is a chance for recovery for sure. And it's not that hard. They don't have to fix their image or go back on things that they have said. That might help, but just make good games and the sales will come. I don't think they will though. Something tells me they're gonna move on with the same mentality until they go bankrupt, until they go under. Even if they change the CEO, I don't think that that's gonna fix the company. I don't think that's gonna change their image and the way that they think. But it might help, who knows? I think that at this point though, things are so far gone and people have lost so much trust and there is so much disdain for Ubisoft that probably the better thing is just to sell the company. And I gotta be honest, it pains me to say that. I grew up on some of their games, like Assassin's Creed was my childhood. I really like those games. So it sucks because I would like to see Assassin's Creed succeed. I like the franchise. I would like to see them do well, but I'm not inclined to hope for Ubisoft's success either. And it's not just because of the way I feel about the company. A lot of the practices that they implement become industry standard. A lot of things like their monetization practices are everything that's wrong with the AAA industry. And if they do something scummy that succeeds, it is very likely that that'll become a new industry standard. So you end up finding yourself in a really weird position, right? Because I want AC Shadows to do well. I like the franchise. I would like that to be a good game. It looks good. I hope it's good. I just wish that the franchise could continue under a different company because I don't want to support the company, but at the same time, I really like the games. Bottom line is that's how I feel. I love the franchise and I hate the company. It does feel though like Assassin's Creed Shadows is holding Ubisoft's destiny in their hands, so that better be a good game, otherwise I don't know how many more of these mess ups they can have before actually going under. As far as what happens next, we're just gonna have to wait and see. It seems that there's something new that's coming out every single week, and if there's something interesting that happens, I'll probably talk about it. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more videos like these, don't forget to subscribe, and I hope you all have a great weekend.